All right, hello. We're going to talk about aligning the go-kart today, and I'm going to be using a Superleggero, just an example, but obviously with an alignment, the philosophy applies across the board. So what you're going to need is one of these sniper tools. Now these are available online and they do make them traditionally for gas go-karts, but obviously, again, the philosophy applies across the board. Now, they are somewhat expensive, $300 and $350, I think, but we realized that after we purchased these, they are worth way more than $300, just because everything about the handling of the car goes back to the alignment of the front end. We noticed a huge change in the characteristics of our fleet by making sure that everybody was aligned, because the OEM just didn't do that from the factory. So this is an important tool, and in addition to that, in order to get the laser to shoot across the car, we need some way of mounting it. So this is what we came up with. Your solution may be different, but we just took an existing rim and we put a piece of sheet metal across the top of it with just a little bit of duct tape to protect your fingers from getting cut. And what this allows us to do is take the wheel off and then just replace it with this device so that we have a flat surface to mount the sniper leg. And then I have an oversized washer, which when I put it in here is going to grab a hold of the rim so that when I tighten this down, it's going to keep it from rotating. And that's really important because the sniper has to be level in order to make this alignment work. Let me go ahead and tighten this down. And you'll notice that it doesn't rotate very easily. And the sniper has magnets on the bottom of it, so it just snaps right into place. Now you can see I've already done that to the other side. We've got the opposing one across there. And I'm going to turn this on by twisting the back of this, connecting the battery. And then I'm going to look at the top of the bubble level here to make sure the device is actually level. Again, that's really important because if this device isn't level, obviously when you're shooting across the car, your orientation will be wrong. All right, so once we got both sides hooked up, we're going to go ahead and turn them both on. And I'm going to make sure that they are level. Now, I've got these hooked up. The next thing I want to do is I want to crack the nuts on the tie rods, and I want to loosen these up. And you're going to need to do this both on here and on the underside of the car. So if you have the car already jacked up like we have, that's ideal. But just also know that if you don't have a level flat surface, you can still raise the nose of the car up, and you can still make the snipers level enough to make this still work, even if you can only raise one side of the car. That's the way we used to do it. So it is possible. You want to start with the steering wheel as straight as possible. One thing we learned is that if you're trying to do that by looking at the back of the car or the front of the car, it's a little deceiving because the barriers on the side of the car actually taper to the front. So we just kind of skip that step and we just kind of eyeball it, just looking at it from this orientation and saying, okay, is that reasonably straight? And it gives us a good starting position. So I've already cracked the nuts on both sides of the tie rod, both underneath the car and on this side. And then from here, I'm just going to pay attention to the laser. So you want to orient the laser to the point where you can see it on both sides. If you have anything obstructing, make sure you move that cable out of the way. And the other thing I should have mentioned is, of course, that we have the plastic guard off of the center of it. Now, at some point, we thought we would save some time and drill a hole through the plastic because we thought it was going to take too much time to take this plastic off every time. But one, we realized the alignment doesn't have to be done that often. And two, it's just much easier to take this off and use this configuration with the temporary wheels so you can just shoot straight across. We did run into some cars that the cable harness was in the way, so sometimes you may have to disconnect this to give you a nice clear line of sight, and otherwise you can just shoot straight through it. So as you can see, the sniper allows you to make two types of adjustments. It allows you to adjust the camber and the toe. Now the camber is going to be a whole separate issue. That's something you're not going to worry about in this particular video. So as far as the up and down orientation of the laser, that's not going to change in this case. So don't worry about that. You're going to worry more about the front to back. So one line to the front is 1 inch of positive toe, and then one line to the back is 1 inch of negative toe. Now, the setup is really going to be up to you. Do you like to go neutral, where the wheels are perfectly straight, or do you like to have them bite in a little bit? That's just going to be dependent upon your setup. You're just going to have to try it, drive the car, see what you like. For us, we found that neutral or positive 1 inch is the best setup. We've played with both. It seems to be very easy for general public to use, and it also still allows the car to handle really well. But you're also balancing good tire wear. So you're not wearing the edges of the tires particularly bad one way or the other. So for this case, let's just go ahead and set this up neutrally. I'm going to walk to this side of the car. And as I make these adjustments, I'm going to make the adjustment on the steering knuckle, the tie rod first, and then I'm going to move the assembly to re-straighten the steering wheel. Because every adjustment you make here, you want to balance it out by re-straightening. So make a little bit of adjustment, straighten it out. A little bit of adjustment, straighten it out. So as we can see, we're already +1 on this particular car. And we want to try to bring this in a little bit. So as I bring this in, I'm going to counteract that by turning the tie rod a little bit. And then after I turn the tie rod, I'm going to wiggle the steering wheel and I'm going to see where we end up. And I can keep adjusting this until I get the dots exactly where I want them to be, adjusting and wiggling. Keep an eye on your steering wheel as you do this. You don't want to get so far out of whack that your steering wheel ends up right or left. Nobody likes to drive a car where the steering wheel is not straight, but also understanding that there are some limitations to your setup where the steering wheel might be crooked a little bit, even though the wheels themselves are straight. So trust the laser, use this as a reference on the steering wheel. So that's it on both sides. I now have the laser exactly dead center. And you're now ready to tighten the bolts back down. Now, one tip I will give you when you tighten these down, if you want to look at the bottom of the car with me, you're going to want to tighten this back up in addition to using your 22mm socket. And the reason for that is the steering knuckles have a float position. You can see where they can tilt side to side. That is very important that you allow the steering wheel to rotate side to side and the steering knuckle to tilt up and down. The worst thing you can do is come down here, tighten this bolt down and lock this in one position, because then when the steering wheel tries to turn, it's going to jam it and it's going to make the steering really heavy for your customers. So make sure this is in the neutral floating position. Take your 22mm, hold your tie rod, and then tighten your bolt down. Trying to make sure that this is what you're locking and not locking the actual knuckle, so that when you're done, you should have a nice float position. And that's pretty much it. You're now ready to disassemble everything, put the wheels back on, and give it for a test drive. We appreciate you watching. Let us know if you have any comments or questions. We'll be happy to do what we can to answer them.